This is Dr. David Pomeroy, your host on ADHD Focus. I wanted to remind you that the show is not intended to be a recommendation for diagnosis or treatment of any condition for any specific person. Please consult your mental health professional or doctor managing your ADHD or mental health issues about any diagnosis or treatment-related information that you hear on the show. Refer your ADHD provider to the show if he or she would like more information. Thank you. Welcome to the show today. And my guest today is Teresa Maitland, who has spent her life doing ADHD coaching and helping students and families make transitions and adaptations to having ADHD and learning disorders, getting through high school and then on to college. Her degree is in education, and she has a doctorate with special interest and emphasis on special education. She's been past 24 years working at a college doing coaching and helping families, and has helped develop some of the ADHD coaching programs that are in the country. So I'm very happy to have her here. Teresa, welcome to the show.
Well, welcome, David, and thank you so much for this great opportunity to talk with you.
And I should mention that Teresa has co-authored with Dr. Pat Quinn, a developmental pediatrician, 2 books that are published by the American Psychological Association. One is for parents, called Ready for Takeoff, and one is for teens, On Your Own. And those go through many of the different points we're talking about today. So one of the things we want to address is, why is it that the transition from high school to college, which is certainly a major one in the lives of most kids and families, why is it that some kids do it fairly well with some expected minor bumps? Why is it for some of them it is really tough, and others just give up and drop out, or they get through one semester, maybe 2, drop out for a while, and it's back and forth, and there's just seem to be different adaptations there. I'm thinking of one. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's like the $1 million question, right?
Yes. I'm thinking of one guy I'd known from probably when he was about 12, and he'd used medications and other strategies to help with his ADHD. He had very supportive parents who weren't too tightly controlling, but still tried to keep an eye on things. And in his senior year, he decided he was going to do it on his own. He didn't want medication. He didn't like the way it made him feel, even though his focus was better. And he did fairly well through that end of high school. Then he went to college, actually a fairly local one, so it wasn't far away from home. And things really fell apart. He failed many of his classes, just couldn't keep up with things. And recently he's come back and said, boy, I guess I do need these. And we talked about a different medicine, so it would be as transparent for him as possible. And he's doing much better now. And others that, even if they're taking medicine, time management isn't good. It's more fun to either party or just do other things, and things fall apart.
Well, as I'm listening to you, I'm really thinking it could be complicated because there's so many factors, right? But I'm thinking of all the students I've met too, and what's been curious is I've met some students who have very severe ADHD, maybe very severe learning disabilities, and yet they were really successful. And I start thinking, like, what is the variable that seems to really make a difference? And in my mind, it's what this young man has now come to grips with. I think a key factor when a kid goes to college as to how successful they're going to be is, do they understand and own their difference? And do they, if they've come to that acceptance and their families have helped them come to that, and they know how to express their own needs and go use resources. In a way, it doesn't matter how severe their issues are, because I'm getting flashes in my mind as you're talking of, I've met some kids who have severe dyslexia, severe dyslexia, may have bipolar disorder, and they have ADHD. So all those things you would think would set them up for failure. Now, they would tell you they didn't have an easy time, but because they came in knowing that they had those differences and owned it, they set up with their families their resources ahead of time. And there wasn't the rebelliousness or the resistance to say, I have something going on with me. So I do think, like, one of the main factors is how many times the family has owned the difference and knows what it is and can advocate, but the young people who don't seem to do well are the ones that either don't have any clue. I'll give you an example. Last summer, I offered freshmen that had been accepted the opportunity to do FaceTime calls with me before coming, so we could get to know each other. And this one young man was on FaceTime with me, and I said, "So, Tom, what is your difference, and how do you think it's going to impact you in college?" And he took his phone with him to the steps, and he yelled, "Mom, what's my difference, and how do you think it's going to impact me?" So I think that would be, in my mind, one of the key variables that really, really helps predict whether somebody's going to end up fighting and resisting and failing and not reaching out for resources. Oh, certainly the college that they pick is also a factor. If you're shy, but again, if you know your differences, you're going to make a wiser decision than someone who doesn't.
And certainly I see the other factor in that is, have parents accepted it? And if one parent has and the other parent thinks, "Oh, you don't really need meds, I was like that, and I did okay," or just kind of puts in little digs about, well, you really aren't that good. Or parents just figure, hey, take medicines, you'll be fine, and really don't concentrate on helping a kid, number one, advocate for themselves. And I tell kids back, in 5th, 6th, 7th grade, if you can learn how to ask questions and advocate for yourself, manage your time, those may be the most important things you learn through high school. And that gives them the confidence. But parents also need to be there and not be always the one who's taking on school or keeping track of homework and right all the time, or threatening, like, boy, if you don't get this assignment done, you probably won't get into a good college, and that'll cause you problems. Well, that boosts the anxiety factor through the roof.
Right. Well, you're right that maybe, what you're saying is the preconditions for a young person to know and accept their difference and feel positively about it and use resources as their parents must have come to that realization so they could actually build that. And you're right, in some situations, the families have denied, they've been embarrassed about the difference. They don't want the young person to come out in the open because of their fears. So I think you're right. It's like ecologically, the whole environment that's raising the young person could help them be prepared if everybody could see the difference, actually value it. I actually think if we could help not see it as a curse and see it as
exactly.
A gift.
And, some parents will say, well, I don't want them labeled. And I'm thinking, okay, you don't want them, quote, labeled as having ADD, but then he'll just be labeled as a dropout, who has drug problems, or someone who is working at McDonald's. There are consequences of not dealing with it, which I don't think many people think through, and certainly public media doesn't.
Right. Well, you were saying something before we started the podcast about a young man that is making a decision to maybe go to a college way far away. I think, again, if the family really understands and accepts the child's difference and the young person does too, then everybody's going to make a wiser decision about, like, you don't go to college based, for example, where I worked at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, there are really good resources for young people, but the class sizes are going to be, for example, you're going to have 400 in your biology class. So if you want to come there because of sports, because we have a good basketball team, if that's what the family is focusing on, we have to really think about, can your young person learn in a group that big?
Yeah,
there are other colleges with teams that aren't quite as competitive, but maybe the class size is going to be in the 50s, and there's going to be more supervision in the dorms. Every fall, I get invited to be on at a college readiness fair for a private school here, and there's some colleges represented where the college is so small that they said that if the young person doesn't show up at class 2 days in a row, the professor will call them. So I always say, well, I'm from the large impersonal state system where if you don't show up, nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Yeah.
So the decision making, everything is really based on what you and I are saying, that if the family situation if the people in the family understand and value and have allowed the young person to own the difference, then they'll make wise decisions and maybe encourage a good decision, and also preemptively getting involved with resources, predicting the kinds of problems that are going to happen rather than being blindsided by them.
Yes, and actually there are two big state schools here in Washington, and one of them tends to be, here's the list of the resources, call us if you need help, good luck. And the other one has much more intense parent-student, like a 3-day orientation, and each of them have separate things and very much more of a community feel. If you need help, we're here, and there's a residence hall advisor on every single floor of this 12-story dorm. And if you're having trouble, there's someone you can talk to. And it's just a whole different flavor, and yet they're both state schools. And yes, you have 600 people in your freshman biology class. My daughter dealt with that. She doesn't have ADD, but she said, I just sit in the second row. I don't see the others. Perfectly small class to me. Well, that's a pretty practical way of doing it.
Well, that's a great example where a large impersonal state institution can choose to create a community by really, before the young person comes on campus, really connecting them to the resources and making them the difference, though, because I think we're kind of moving into what's different between high school and college here. But I think, like the college where I worked, there were tremendous resources. We had coaching available on a weekly basis, but the student would have to make the appointments, which is a big challenge.
Right, and that's the self-advocacy, right?
Well, and I always think everything, there are a lot of resources on that campus. There's a writing center, there's a learning center, there's advising, there's the psychological supports, but all of these offices operate in different buildings, right? And they all require the ability to schedule an appointment and remember it. And I always think, well, that's one of the examples of how different high school is from college. When you're in high school, your resources find you, right? The teachers are in the building, they find you, and if you're not doing well, they come to you. And it's such a smaller climate, where in college, depending on the size college you pick, there's a lot of resources, but law, you have to access them.
And that gets back to the accepting the difference that, it's okay if I ask for help, which I think should be okay anywhere. But also in high school, it may be mom making the appointment, probably is. Mom saying, and don't forget, I'm going to pick you up to school because you have an appointment today, and did you set the reminders on your phone? All those things where the reminders and everything, kids could set it on their own on the phone, but it's mom kind of owning running your problems instead of seeing that. And I in some families say, 16, you've got to figure out how to manage this. You're in charge of your medicines. I'm not going to sit there and watch you take them or ask you if you've got it. I'll help you figure out a system that works for you in terms of remembering it. If you don't remember it, then you don't. And you're in charge of remembering the appointments. I'll tell you, maybe that week or night before, we do have an appointment, but not hover over making sure it's in their phone. Now, the other factor in here, and there's an interesting study about mothers with ADHD. Since often mom is running the household logistics, if mom has ADD and doesn't remember the appointments or didn't write them down or can't find her keys, and the study looked at the combinations of mothers with ADD, children did or didn't have ADD, mothers without ADD, kids did or didn't. And even if the child didn't, if mom did, their outcome was worse and rougher.
Wow.
And if mom didn't and child had ADD. So the impact of parents' organization, and particularly moms. So I try to be tuned in when someone's in as a student, they're having problems, that's why they're here, to figure out, Mom, are you part of the picture as far as ADD? Let's get you treated. And some moms will say, yeah, I need to after he gets settled. Okay, but let's keep after that. So the other things I think people may lose sight of is that your even more basic needs, parents are buying the food, usually cooking the meals. Yes, hopefully by the time you're even 14 or 15 or 16, you're doing your own laundry, but it's right there at home. You get to college, you have to at least remember to get to the cafeteria on time. And you have to know where the laundry is. You have to have the quarters for it. And so it takes some planning and having a regular place for things. Do you know what you need tomorrow so you can set that out and have it ready to go instead of forgetting?
Yeah, you're hitting all the subtle things that nobody thinks about that are immediately necessary. One of besides all the things you're mentioning, like remembering to stop and eat and being on time there's also this real basic skill that I've seen, waking yourself up.
Yes.
Because people with ADHD, so many kids have sleep issues. Many, many times the students I meet have never practiced waking themselves up. And they're all of a sudden overnight in a situation where it's demanded. And some professors, they lock the doors at 8:05. You get realized. Some places you don't. But I've asked some of the students, like, how did that work in high school? They say, well, my dad would shake me, or my mom would spray water in my face. So it's so hard to pick up. And those are the little things that are so different all of a sudden because you are living on your own. You have to be able to wake yourself up. You have to be able to manage your medicine. You have to be able to, like you said, have your clothes be clean. I had some students who were also on the spectrum and had ADHD, and I can remember that this one young man, he was wearing the same sweatshirt over and over, and he was feeling sad because people were making fun of him. And I asked his permission to share an observation, and I just said, Bill, the sweatshirt you're wearing, I know you don't notice it, but it really smells. And he said to me sitting there, I'm learning so many new things. I have to get along with people. I have to do harder work. Why do I have to learn how to do my own laundry? It's so hard. And that's the kind of thing that I always think, how can we scaffold these daily living skills? You really practice college very much until you're there, but there's so much we could be doing that would make the transition not as challenging. What we didn't talk about is the legal and academic differences. I don't know if we have time now.
Well, yeah, I think that's also a big part in terms of the being able to access the support or have accommodations, those kinds of things, which is different, and it's a different kind of program. And up through high school, it's under what's called a 504 or an IEP program, and 504 refers to Section 504 of a federal law in terms of everyone's entitled to a free and public education. Whereas you go to college, and that's under the Americans for Disability Act. Now, ADHD is covered under that, but there are different things you have to show. If you have this symptom, how does it impair your function, and what can be done to help it? So it's a little stricter guidelines sometimes.
Well, and the other thing that's confusing for kids and parents is the two laws have different missions. The laws that govern K through 12 are really about individual success and individualized, interventions and success, where the ADA is really not about success. All colleges really have to provide is the opportunity for equal access. So what that means is colleges don't have to provide help on one-on-one help on how to overcome your disability. They just have to provide like instructional ramps. So if you have trouble, let's say you do have trouble finishing your test because you work more slowly, colleges don't have to provide a coach or a learning specialist to teach you the strategy, where high schools have those things, whether you get it in a group or you get it individually. Colleges only have to provide an office that provides an accommodation where you could get extended time. So it's really about modifications, but not individualized help.
And getting back to what we said about choice of colleges, some colleges have the resources if you ask for individual help,
right?
But the student has to ask for it. There's that advocate for yourself.
And that's really key, because I think more and more colleges, because they're worried about general graduation rates and retention of everybody, more and more colleges have free resources for all students. They aren't in the disability office. So if people were looking at colleges, we shouldn't just be researching the disability office. We should find out, like, for example, where I worked, there was a learning center and a writing center. Any student on campus could have weekly appointments at both.
Wow.
So you don't have disability. But the colleges aren't required to have those things. They only are required by law to have a disability office that maybe provides extended time, books on tape, note-taker accommodations, but not really. They don't have to have anybody teach you how to study or how to take notes.
And one of the things that on extended time, and that's certainly a common accommodation people think of, in high school, gee, you're having trouble finishing tests, so you can have an extra half as much time. And when it gets to college, hasn't been studied, I don't think, in high school, but when it gets to college, there's some pretty involved in significant studies that look at, does extended time, number one, really make that much difference for the kid with ADD, and number two, is it fair to other students who don't have it? And most of it says, the extended time really doesn't improve your grades or anything with ADD. It might if you also have a learning disorder. If you have bad dyslexia, then do you get the questions spoken to you or read to you? Or are there some accommodations for that? And you may need extra time on that. So there's new information that's coming out also. But I think the other, switching gears a little bit, schools are supposed to follow 504, and that's a real variable mess. And some schools seem to resist, we don't want to have to, or gee, you're getting B's, your grades are good enough. Yes, but the student's getting B's because she has 2 tutors. One parent spends at least 2 hours a night, and she's doing homework 4 hours a night, so she doesn't have any time for other social activities. That's not average. And schools don't tend to look at the whole picture. But that's a whole other subject.
Right. But I think, again, what parents maybe don't realize is the way the laws are written, each college gets to define their graduation requirements, their documentation requirements, and there isn't consistency across. For example, our college did believe you could be gifted and have ADHD or a learning disability, where right down the road from us, another college, if you had really high grades, would not approve you for accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's some things, and I wanted to mention, in high school, there's some accommodations that are common that won't exist in college. Like people frequently have something called extensions for assignments, and they have blanket extensions, and they don't have to really get things done on time because they have that in their IEP. At college, that accommodation is harder to get because the professor has the right to define whether it's critical to the course that you get things on time. For example, we've had students in news writing courses where you have to have the article written within the 2-hour class, and that the journalism school defined that was an essential requirement for journalism.
Yeah, for the profession, exactly.
Right, to say that. So sometimes students are being raised on formal accommodations and modifications that aren't going to be in college.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you never got counted down for your spelling errors. Well, the Spanish department is allowed to count you down for your spelling errors. So that by itself can really cause stress for people who haven't been prepared.
Yes, and if they get those kind of supports even through college, you get to the job market and say, well, gee, I want extra time to do all these projects I'm supposed to manage. Well, we'll hire somebody else. So it's life preparation. Yes, you've got to be able to do things on time. And I think that is a tricky thing for people to negotiate and learn about, that there really are differences in the ways high schools and colleges are allowed to approach things.
And I think if people are aware of that, they can carefully, from 9th through 12th grade, kind of look at the accommodations and maybe keep teaching the skill that the person needs so they don't need the accommodation as much. I know that it sounds awful because certainly students sometimes really do have to have these accommodations, but if every time we intervene, I wish we would also teach the skill, and I wish we would start slowly stating them. And I always say to parents, be careful what you ask for in our public schools because you're probably going to get it. Because nobody I know who's in the school wants a lawsuit. But I would ask you to really think critically about, is what you're asking for really in your child's best interest? Is it necessary? And will it be present in the future? And how could we at the same time teach the skill?
Right. Yeah, it's teaching the skills. And I tell people all the time, medications can help you focus, and if you're getting better grades because you can focus, it's because you're smart. It's just the pill isn't making you smart. Well, the pill also doesn't make you figure out planning your assignments and stuff like that. You need to come up with those skills. Well, we're at the end of our time, at least for this podcast, and I certainly appreciate your expertise. I think one of the key points to take away would, even in 10th or 11th grade, parents looking at, does your child understand their difference? They have ADHD, you have some learning problems. Do you understand that so that you can accept it? And asking, what is your difference and how do you think it's going to impact you in college? So that kids are thinking about that, and parents. And there are certainly a lot of other things we touched on, and I'm sure we'll get back together and do another podcast or two to work things through the other things we've talked about. So my guest today has been Teresa Maitland, a coach and educational specialist who's worked in colleges and is now doing more coaching for parents and families, also writing articles and doing talks to organizations. She has written a number of articles for Attitude Magazine. That's ADD, Etude Magazine, which is an excellent resource on all kinds of subjects for folks with ADHD. And Teresa, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program, and I look forward to doing another.
Well, I really enjoyed it, and I hope we can get together again. Thank you so much.
Okay, this is Dr. David Pomeroy signing off for ADHD Focus, and we'll see you on another time. Bye-bye.